All right, as everybody kind of trickles in, for those that are seated, we're just going to take a quick moment of silence, and then I'm going to read this beautiful prayer that a friend gave to me for us to kind of take together. Dear God, we would like to thank you for this beautiful day, this gracious opportunity, the wonderful life that you have given us, and for a dynamic program to live by. Please be with us in this project to reveal our knowledge of your will and what we are about to do. We pray that this will bring understanding of you to others who have suffered as we have suffered. And with that, I've asked a friend to come read a little something for us. Sorry, I lied. It's a lot. Okay.
Starting from here. Hi, I'm Jean. I'm an alcoholic. It is plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. But with the alcoholic whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, the business of resentment is infinitely grave. We found that it is fatal. For when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the spirit. The insanity of alcohol returns and we drink again. And with us, to drink is to die. When we decide who is to hear our story, we waste no time. We have written inventory and we are prepared for a long talk. We explain to our partner that we are about to do and why we have to do it. He should realize that we are engaged upon a life and death errand. Most people approached in this way will be glad to help. They will be honored by our confidence. We pocket our pride and go at it, illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Once we have taken the step, withholding nothing, we are delighted. We can look at the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel nearness of our Creator. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. We feel we are on the broad highway, walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe.
Thanks for reading. All right, and our speaker on steps 4 and 5 will be a really dear friend of ours, Cleo D. from Baltimore, Maryland.
Hello, everyone. I'm Cleo. I'm an alcoholic. Oh, wonderful to be here. Thank you to everyone that was part of putting this together and bringing everyone together here. Thank you to everyone that spoke before me. It's been an honor to be a part of this already. Every single person that has spoken, Chris and Scott, and Claire and Ricky and Jimmy, every single one of them, in listening to them, I'm so clear that I have the same illness that they have, and that they've found a program of recovery in the Big Book that is the same program that I have found. And this is a group of people that has a really special place in my heart. I actually didn't think about it until I was listening to everyone speak, but so my home group's the Firing Line. I live in Baltimore, Maryland. I'm not quite to saying I'm from there yet. I was born and raised in Northern California. I've lived in Baltimore for a couple of years. And our home group is the Firing Line. We meet on Tuesday nights in northern Baltimore City at 7 p.m. If anyone's traveling through Baltimore on a Tuesday, we'd love to have you. It's a Big Book meeting. And I realized as I was listening to these people that Ricky was the first speaker that we ever had, the first meeting of that group. And Chris was our 1-year anniversary speaker, and Jimmy was our 2-year anniversary speaker. So it's like, it's very cool to be up here sharing a microphone with some of my heroes in Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's very nice to be up here, carrying a unified message. Everyone that spoke, it was just like, I am that, and I understand the life and death errand that I'm on here, and the need for me to Jimmy set me up perfectly, talking about walking through the darkness to get to the sunlight of the spirit, but it's like that's what we do in 4 and 5. And I do that not to just not drink, but because my life is totally unmanageable and unbearable sober without it. And in each of their talks, there were different little things that were touched on that perfectly, all of these steps are interconnected. But just like the delusion that was present, that each one of them presented so well, and that like is the same for me. And that's been so much a part of my journey in 4 and 5, in being sponsored, in sponsoring other women, especially through these steps, is like coming to see how much we are one and how much I'm the same as all of you, instead of this terminal uniqueness that I came in here with. Like Chris was talking about like how he thought he was a better drunk driver than the other people, like because they should, like for those of us that drink all the time, they should have like a drunk driving test as well. It's like me too. Like I was a good drunk driver until I passed out, like exactly like Chris said, like I was a good drunk driver until I ran out of cocaine, and then I drove off the road. Like, and literally, that the one time I totaled a car drunk, I had passed out for a couple hours. I woke up and my boyfriend had done all the cocaine. And so I had to go to work, and I fell asleep at the wheel. I don't know what happened. I do know that I managed to total a car without getting a single scratch on the exterior, which is, something I'm still pretty proud of to this day. But I went off the freeway, I guess, like got some trees stuck up in the undercarriage, broke both axles, and came back onto the freeway and then woke up. So, but this delusion that I like lived in my alcoholism of like, oh, the rules don't apply to me, and I'm different, and for me, like that carries right into sobriety. It might not be around driving drunk, it might be around rules not applying to me in other areas, but like thinking I'm fine and the problem is everyone else and the way this world is set up. It's like what that looks like in the same exact arena with the same thinking is, at like 4 years sober, like only a couple years ago at this point, when COVID and everything happened. I moved to Baltimore before COVID happened. I didn't want to be bothered to change my license. I had a California license. I didn't want to be bothered to go to the DMV, or the MVA as they call it in Maryland. And I didn't want to be bothered to get a new license. It's just a hassle, and whatever. I'm a fine driver. I shouldn't have to deal with the stuff that everybody else has to deal with. And so I didn't deal with it. As a result of not dealing with it, my registration expired. I still had like tags from California. I couldn't get my registration renewed because I didn't have a license. And then COVID hit, and then I really didn't want to deal with it. And so like what happened is it all went on for so long. And after stuff started to open back up, that like 2 years ago, less than 2 years ago, I guess, probably a year and a half ago, like 5 years sober, I try to get a new driver's license, and they're like, you don't even have a license in the state of California anymore. Like, it's been so long that you've let everything expire. Like, your car's not registered anywhere. You don't have a driver's license anywhere. Like, you have to take these written tests and take a road test if you want your license back. I'm like sponsoring people, like Mrs. AA, and like, but like, I don't want to have to deal with all of that. Like, that's just a lot to deal with. But I did deal with it. So, and it's like, and that's working a program. So you can just imagine what my life looks like when I'm not working a program. Yeah, it's quite a mess. And I'm really, really good at convincing myself above everyone, but everyone else as well, of like what a sob story my life is. It's interesting. Like, I have the privilege of sponsoring a number of women now, and over the years, it's like the biggest place that I lose women, that I give them some instruction, and I never hear from them again, or I don't hear from them for a couple of years, is here when we get to 4 and 5. And it's like, this is, of course it is, like this, that was my experience as well. Every single time for the first 3 years that I got to 4 and 5, what my mind convinced, well, like I never got to 5. When I got to 4, what my mind convinced me of was, this isn't the right sponsor for you. You need to find somebody that you're really able to bear your whole soul to. And like, I'm only able to see this in hindsight, that this is just alcoholism, like trying to keep me sick. I was fully convinced in those moments that it wasn't the right sponsor. And so like, I'd work 1, 2, 3, I'd start on 4. Then I suddenly needed a different sponsor, and I'd find a new sponsor, and I'd do the same thing, and I'd do that for as long as I could until I drank, and I'd do it over and over again, always convinced that I was trying to do AA and that I didn't have the right sponsor. But really, it's like I was absolutely terrified of looking at all of this darkness, all of the things that I'd been trying to suppress for so long. That all of the things that I had drank over. And it's interesting because it's like the story that I got here with, the story that I drank over, like once I stopped drinking, the story stayed the same as to like why I needed a drink. But now it was like, this is why I can't be okay sober. And I had a lot of experience with things other than AA getting in the way of my 4 and 5 too. At one point I was in therapy, because that's one route that I tried for a lot more willingly than the steps in Alcoholics Anonymous for a long time. Because I like to go and talk about myself. I like to go and tell my story. In my experience, therapists are not really saying you're totally full of crap and, like you're the one that's in the wrong here. They're like, oh yes, that must be really hard for you. We should bring your parents in and talk to them about how their parenting actually harmed you, and then we do that. Like, that's a very real thing. Like, then my parents come in and they tell them that they loved me too much, is like essentially what the case is with my parents. I'm an only child. My parents are like absolutely obsessed with me. Like, I was joking yesterday, but it's true. Like, somebody was saying that I don't remember who I was talking to, but somebody was saying their mom drove them to school all through college. And I was like, yeah, if I called up my mom now and told her I was scared to drive to work, she'd probably move to Baltimore from California and drive me to work every day. Like, I'm not even, like, 100%. But, like, I needed therapy for the way that my parents had damaged me. I got to inventory, and I started talking to my therapist. This happened 2 different times. Same therapist, 2 different attempts at sobriety, 2 different sponsors. I started talking about how I was being asked to write about all of this trauma, therapy word, that word's not in our literature, like all this trauma that, like, I'm now not able to sleep at night and I want to drink again. And like, my therapist is like, well, you really should pause on that. Like, you should really do some more therapy. You should wait until you've got some more sobriety under your belt. Like, this is re-traumatizing you to go through and take a look at this stuff right now. And so I listened to her because that's great. Like, yeah, that sounds much better than looking at all this stuff. Like, I'd much rather do that and keep going to therapy. So I did that, and I got drunk. And I did it twice, and I got drunk, until it became clear that it was like, this is the stuff that I am drinking over. And like, there is no way to get to the light except for through the darkness. Like, there is no way there. And I had some previous attempts at inventory that looked very different than the inventory that I have come to know that's out of the big book. One of those was the instruction to write my own autobiography, which is not a good instruction for an alcoholic like me, because I did that. I actually found it like a couple years into this sobriety, but like, I write this sob story of my life. Like, this is the story that's keeping me sick. And like, I'll tell you a brief version of that now, because this is like, this change in perspective is what inventory has done for me in early sobriety and every single time, throughout sobriety, wherever I'm at, like I can, and every single time, no matter where I'm at, it's like, oh, I'm having this problem with my job. I'm having this problem with my marriage. I'm having just this problem with my parents. And I talked to my sponsor, and she's like, well, we've 10th stepped this a couple times. Like, maybe it's time to put pen to paper because it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. And I'm just, I'm like, that's not gonna work here. Like, even though it's worked every single time, like, even though these steps have completely revolutionized and changed my life, like, over and over again, from a place of like being miserable sober to the alcohol problem being removed to like having to move across the country because my husband got arrested and being in a tremendous amount of fear, like all of these different instances of like having to take a whole look at my life and get a new perspective on like where I'm at because stuff has gotten really uncomfortable again. Every single time they've worked, and every single time that I get to a bumpy place again, I'm convinced they're not going to work. I'm convinced that's not going to be the solution. And thank God that there's a knowing. I thank God for God, and thank God I don't have any other options. And like that experience is, and that knowing that it will work is what wins out. And the reality of my step one, that like I don't have anything else to do, is very, very real for me. But what my story looks like when I get here, it's like I was raised in Northern California by a surgeon and his wife, and they only had one child, and they had a somewhat unhappy marriage, and so they both looked to me for all their love and affection. And there was a tremendous amount of pressure put on me, and they gave me everything in the world that I wanted, and they gave me way too much money, and they gave me this huge allowance that was completely unreasonable, and I had no idea of how to lift a finger for myself. And so, when I was then released out into the world to be an adult, I had no idea how to be an adult. I had never even been taught how to look at the price tags on groceries, and so that's like how my life began. And I at 11 I was diagnosed with this terrible illness. I'm going to come to the other side of all of this. Don't worry, it's not really a terrible illness. I was diagnosed with this terrible illness, this hereditary illness that less than 5,000 people in the United States have, that I inherited from my mother, but she didn't really understand it because she has a very mild case and I have a severe one. And there was no, and the reality of that is I was in and out of the hospital from the time that I was 11 until the time that I was 19. It was pretty bad. There wasn't an FDA-approved treatment. I'm missing the enzyme in my body that regulates stress. These days, it's wonderfully managed. They take the enzyme from healthy people like all of you and put it into a powdered form, and it comes on ice to my front door, and I reconstitute it with water, and I stick a needle in my stomach every 4 days, and you would never know I have this thing. If I don't do that, I'm back in the hospital. It's like life goes on, and then I start, like, I'm this chubby uncomfortable kid, and I start having these weird instances of like, kind of, I don't know what the word is. I don't like, the therapy words I don't like to use, but I have a couple things like happen where just like men do some really cruel things that are kind of out of nowhere, like I'm running down the street, like on a run, training for soccer at like 11 years old, and some men pull over in their pickup truck and tell me like how fat and ugly I am, and I really shouldn't be anywhere in the world without putting clothes on to cover me up. And like then my other friend is dating this older man, and he is, she's very pretty and I'm still very awkward. And he says something about putting a bag over my head and giving me to his friends. And so I start to, like, these things, like, they start to, like, form this idea of myself as very, like, very undesirable. And it goes on. And in college, like, I end up getting raped. And like all of this, I end up getting roofied and I end up getting raped. And like, so all of this stuff, it's like, this is all the stuff that I use, like while I'm drinking. It's like, I tell that story. Oh, and the kicker with this disease that I have is that most of the people that have it get put on opiates, and a lot of them end up opiate addicts because there's a level of pain management that's required, especially back when I was younger, before there was this nifty treatment of just reconstituting the enzyme that I'm missing. So I'm told that I'm never going to be able to exist without some type of opiate pain management. And so I show up here, and it's like, first it's like, well, you can't even ask me to stop drinking because of all of that stuff. But then I show up here and it's like, this is my story. This is my story of why I can't be okay sober. These are all the reasons that I'm not okay, and that's fine and good. And like, I stood behind that story for over 3 years. I couldn't stay sober. I couldn't, I never got through inventory because I've come to see all of those things in a very different light, which I'm about to tell you about. But what I have come to see, what's been shown to me, like through sponsorship, thank God for sponsorship, and somebody else on the other side of this inventory to help me see the truth, is like, by deciding that I can't be okay because of those things, I'm keeping myself in the darkness. If I decide I can't be okay because these things happen to me, well, there's nothing to be done about the things that happened. And, if everybody else and everything else is my problem, then I'm going to stay unwell. And if I stay unwell, I have no choice but to drink again. And so I come to see that, I want to be happy. And I start to take a look at this stuff in inventory and like really take a look, not writing out, my life story, which is what I just told you, but taking a look at like what I think has been done to me and then flipping it and looking at my role in all of this. And where, like, what that looks like today with each of those things. My parents. One thing that my second to last sponsor, Judy, one thing that she had me do when I kept coming to her over and over again with inventory about my mother, which is still like my biggest relationship inventory on a regular basis to today. She was like, why don't you write your mother's life story for me? And I did that. And my mother's life story is that her mother was born normal. Her biological mother was born normal, had a very high fever at a very young age, which cooked her brain. She became developmentally disabled and was in a home that she had to be taken care of. In that home, she was raped, which is where my mom came from. My mother was taken from her because she wasn't capable of taking care of a child and put into foster home where she developed a relationship with the foster parent. But then my the woman that I call my grandmother, she died recently, but that I used to call my grandmother, she decided she wanted to adopt my mother, so my mother was taken out of the foster home that she was in and taken into this home, which was a fundamental Christian home. And from a young age, my mom had struggled with that. She remembers being like a young child and not understanding like how she would ask these questions of like, well, how is it possible that like the people who were born before Jesus like can't possibly be saved if they didn't know about him, like but being forced into this like fundamental Christian life that she didn't understand, and growing up with an adopted brother that wasn't biologically related to her, that was very different from her, and her mom her mom didn't let her to have relationships outside of the home because her mother in a lot of ways adopted her for a companion. And so I write this out, and it's like that my mom is like a functioning human is like miraculous, like given all of this. I didn't even mention that she has the same illness that I have. That's how I got it, and she was born 30 years earlier than me, so there was very little medical knowledge about it. And anyways. And so I write this out and I have a very different perspective on like where my mother is coming from. And it's like, and I come to see that like my parents have done nothing for me except try to give me everything that they didn't have, like, and give me all of these opportunities and protect me in the best way that they could and love me in the best way they could. And I feel smothered, and I don't want to fit into this box that they want me to fit in. I don't want to be a doctor and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, and I'm so upset with them that they want me to be something different. They want me to fit into their box. But at the exact same time, I'm so upset with them for not accepting me as I am, but I'm refusing to accept them as they are. And their love is too much, and it's not enough, and it should be different. And like the reality is, like, I was loved. Like I always knew that I was loved. My parents, I'm not a parent. I imagine that if I was a parent of a young woman, I would not be able to like kick that woman out on the streets, which is what I faulted my parents for not doing. The reality was not that they ever said, you don't need to lift a finger, you don't need to work, we'll just take care of you. They were like, you have graduated from college, we've helped you all along. Why don't I hook you up with my friends who can get you jobs? Like, you need to go get a job, you need to go out into this world. Like, that's what they actually said. That's what, and they got me those interviews. I got the jobs. I then like lost them through drinking, or they were too big and too scary, or my boyfriend wasn't in the same city, so I didn't take any of them. But what happened is, at a certain point, my parents were actually so fed up with my freeloading behavior, which was what it was. It was not my parents like had money. They weren't going to let me, I'm not a trust fund baby. Like, they weren't going to let me out on the streets, but it wasn't comfortable for them to fully support my entire life. But they were doing it, and I faulted them for doing it. The reality was I was freeloading, and at a certain point around like age 25, after I had been in and out of rehab for a couple years, at this point I was I was physically sober and totally untreated, not working, sleeping most of the day, and freeloading off my parents. They were paying my rent. They were paying everything. I didn't make a cent. So they were paying everything. They were giving me an allowance. And I was living in Los Angeles, which is a very expensive place to live. And so at 25 years old, they were like, this is it. You're cut off. Like, you need to go be a human. You need to go be, they said it in a much more loving way, but you need to go be an adult. We aren't going to put you out on the street, so we're going to keep paying all of your bills until you figure out a way to pay for yourself. We're going to pay your rent. We're going to pay your car payments, your insurance. We're going to give you an allowance so that you can eat. But this is no longer we're no longer happy about doing this. And this is no longer like, we're now keeping track of every single cent that we give you, and you have to pay us all of it back. Which just went straight over my head because I didn't want to hear that. And so I continued to live in that manner for a couple more years into this sobriety. When then I switched over to freeloading off my husband, who's here in the back of the room. Like, I literally became self-supporting for the first time in 2022. So I'm standing up here, a very flawed, very broken human that like has a beautiful life today as a result of this program, but has done everything like very, very imperfectly. And thank God for like inventory that's helped me to see that this is all me. And this is all, this is all alcoholism. This is nothing that the world has done to me. So what I come to see, like with my parents, is like they did everything to try to help me, except for kick me out onto the street and actually cut me off. I've made amends to my parents. I'm currently paying them back $500 a month, which is very little compared to how much they paid for me for so long. By the time that I actually had done enough inventory and done enough work with a sponsor and got through the later steps and was able to face all of this stuff and ask, so how much is that debt that you guys were keeping track of? By the time I did that, it was over $100,000, which they very generously took $10,000 off for good behavior because I'd been sober for a few years at that point. But I still owe them like over $90,000. That illness that was like the thing that ruined my life, it's like, it's such a blessing. Like, I was born at a time that like, when I was 19 years old, this miracle treatment was approved by the FDA. Like, the people that have had to live their lives in the way that I got to experience what it's like to live life without this treatment from 11 to 19. And it was I was on opiates. I was in and out of the hospital. The biggest manifestation for me was my intestines would swell and distend until you can die from it. On 2 instances, they swelled to the point that my stomach acid started leaking into my body cavity. Like, it was terrible. But I happened to be born at the exact perfect moment in time so that like at 19, this thing was FDA approved and covered by my insurance. And on top of all of that, the person that was in office at the time eliminated lifetime maximum benefits when I was about to hit $1 million, which was my lifetime maximum benefit, because this is a very, very expensive illness to treat. And so like every single thing lined up in such a way that like today I don't feel like I have this other disease. Like, it's much, much easier to treat than my alcoholism. Nobody else would know that I have it if you don't live with me, if you don't see. For this entire sobriety, I have, knock on wood, I haven't been hospitalized once. I was told that I'd always have to be on narcotics. I haven't had to take narcotic pain medication once. A lot of things that is no explanation for a lot of the things that have happened in my life other than God. And God doing things that I can't do, that no human can do. And so the reality is like this illness that I have is really a blessing. It's really a blessing. And this, these things that like the sexual abuse that happened, that required, that took a bit more time. it wasn't, well, all of this took some time. All of this was not necessarily, I didn't get clear or free from the resentment or anything around this my first time through inventory, which is a wonderful thing about inventory, and something I tell the women that I'm working with, like when they're writing their first inventory, we can get, and I know I did, we can get so hung up on like, I have to write every single thing. And I was totally incapable of writing every single thing. Like I wasn't even at all aware of every single thing. Like I could write it. Like we don't get drunk because we accidentally couldn't think of something. It's like, when I'm intentionally leaving things out and just going through the mechanics, which is a way that I had attempted to do the steps before of like, well, I can say I've done inventory if I've written some stuff down on a piece of paper. But if I haven't actually tried to get to the nooks and crannies and the things that I don't want anybody to know, and the stuff that keeps me up at night, and the stuff that I think you won't love me if you know about me, if I haven't actually put any of that on paper, it doesn't matter what is on the paper. I'm not doing inventory. And so as I continue, like, through inventory, and past just looking at resentments, and I start to, on the backside of that, looking at my conduct in relationships, what I get to see about this whole sexual abuse situation is that I'm no different. I've actually made amends to a man for raping him, and it took me a while to see that that's actually what had happened. But, because physiologically it's a little trickier for a woman to rape a man and blah, blah, blah. We all get science. But, like the reality of what happened was that I was in a relationship. This was in college. He was a couple years older, so he graduated. I was still at college. And I was friends with his friend, and I would keep trying to get his friend to have sex with me. All the time, whenever we were drunk, I thought he was really cute, and that's something I did. This is something I did in college, is try to get my boyfriend's friends to have sex with me because it made me feel powerful, that I could get somebody to, that knew I was in a relationship to hook up with me, even though they knew I was in a relationship. This is the lovely stuff I've come to see about myself in inventory. And he kept saying no. He kept saying no. I don't want to. And I just continued to try to wear him down every single time we were drunk together. And he continued to say no. And one night he was blacked out, not able to stand, and I took advantage of him. And I had sex with him against his will. That's what I did. I could say those words a lot sooner than I said I raped him, but that's what I came to see that I actually did. He was not okay with it. It's like, these are the things that I've gotten to see. It's like these people that I feel like have like damaged me in such a way. It's like, I'm no different. And what was done to me, I've done to others. And when I do it to others, I'm able to see what's going on. When I've done it to others, I'm not able to see it in the moment. But when I do inventory, I'm able to see, like, this is in no way about this person, or this person deserving that, or being lesser than other people. It's about a brokenness within me. And, I don't know that I didn't see it as what I see it as now at the time that I was doing it. This is like just one of the many things where it's like on the other side of all of the inventories. This is why, like, we don't just write resentment inventory. I don't just write inventory on all the people that I'm resentful towards and then try to see the other side of that, which there is always another side of, like, the selfishness. And, even with the man that, like, sexually abused me, it's like I can look at my fault there, like my fault in not anything that actually happened, but how I continued that into the rest of my life, carried that into the rest of my life, and how it let me color the way that I looked at all men, and how it informed the way my conduct in relationship with men. And like I had gave myself this, I victimized myself, which then gave me the right to treat everybody else however I wanted to treat them, because I had been treated poorly. And if I just stop there, even if I'm looking at resentment and I'm looking at the other side of resentment and looking at my role in all of that stuff, I'm still not, I need to look at fear, and I need to look at conduct and how I've harmed others, because that's like where I get to see, oh, it might be a completely different person. It's not that like I've done the same thing to this same person always. It's like, oh my gosh, like this thing where like what you had written down on your conduct was that like, and actually this guy was, the first time I wrote inventory, he was actually on my resentments too, because he made it so difficult for me. Like I mean, I'm serious though. Like the first time through, he was on my resentments, because every single guy that ever turned me down was on my resentments. Like, because how dare you, like that is what my resentment inventory looked like when I got here. And it took a while for him to even like make it to conduct, because I have I'm so far gone when I get here, and my inventory looked so different in the beginning than it does now. It's like the stuff that I inventory today. A lot of times it's not like actual actions. Like it's not even stuff that's necessarily like that anybody has, that's ever even actually happened, because like this process has woken me up in such a way that a lot of, as I'm 10th stepping throughout the day, as I'm taking time in the morning, I am not taking time at all in the evening currently, so gonna be honest with all of you about that. Just do a little current inventory there. And I just said, as somebody was, it's like, why do I think that I'm going to be okay? Like, just because I'm good now, like the reality is like at 6 years sober, like life is good most of the time. That doesn't mean hard stuff doesn't happen. That doesn't mean I don't get resentful, selfish, but like the ease with which I'm able to move through the world compared to like, as Chris talked about, this like toxic experience of self-consciousness. Like I was talking to Chris after he spoke last night, like, and I was thinking about when I was newly sober. Like when I was newly sober, the way that I experienced life was like, I was like this, like bobblehead caricature. Like I was like 10 times bigger than all of you. And like my pimples were 10 times bigger than that. And, and like everything that was wrong with me was huge, and everything that was good about me was small, and like nothing, I couldn't see anything like in this world, in the room, except for me, and it was just, everything was painful. And like most of the time today, like my problems are relatively right-sized, and I have a way to move through life pretty frictionless. But it's like that's as a result of doing these steps. And then sometimes my alcoholism likes to do what alcoholism likes to do. That it's like, well, then maybe you're okay doing a little less over here, And the other illness I have, I wouldn't ever do that. I wouldn't ever say, I'm just going to skip a couple days because sticking this needle in my stomach is inconvenient. Like, I can probably get away with a couple days. Alcoholism is a far more fatal illness than the other illness that I have. A lot more people die from alcoholic deaths than they do from hereditary angioedema. And so why do I think that I can like pick and choose part of the treatment plan? But as a result of doing a lot of this stuff most of the time, very imperfectly, it doesn't come up, like my inventory looks very different these days. The relationship that I have with my sponsor and the stuff that we're discussing in inventory looks very different. It's not this stuff like from my past that I've held on to, that I've created this whole story around that's become completely distorted from the reality of what actually happened. It's more like these nooks and crannies of like my thought life, the thoughts that I'm having that I don't want to have, little dishonesties, selfishness and stuff that I see, but I don't want to deal with it. I want to let it continue. Calls that I don't answer because I don't want to take the time. And that's really today, like what inventory looks like for me is like looking at, like I'll give you a current example because I don't like to just talk theoretically. If I'm going to get up here, what's the point of not telling you guys the truth? And sometimes people think I do too much of that, but it says in the big book that, we hope you don't think these self-revealing accounts are in bad taste. But it's like, if you're looking for good taste, I think you came to the wrong place. But, but that, like, I'm not, any of this stuff that I'm saying, I'm not saying it for any other reason other than it's like, some of the stuff that has been hardest for me to come to see about myself. And if I'm going to get up here and talk, like, I'm not going to talk to you about the mechanics of how to write inventory. Talk to your sponsor about that. Like, I'm going to talk to you about the stuff that I've come to see that has shifted my life. Things like, coming in here and like desperately, like, we talk about alcoholism as this illness of separation, and like coming in here and like being so desperate for real connection with other people, being so desperate to just be loved and accepted as I am, and at the same time like being an absolute fraud, which is something that like I got to see in the fear inventory. And the funny thing for me is like my last sponsor was really good at this, and I love her for it. But I was expecting something a little different with fear inventory, of like bringing some really, fears that are really pressing, and like her being like, "Oh, honey, that's not true. Like, you're not a fraud." But instead, like, bringing this stuff to her, and her being like, "Well, yeah, you're afraid that you're not good enough because you're not. Like, if you were good enough on your own power, you wouldn't be here." Like, as like, if you were good enough, you wouldn't need God, like, well, you are afraid of being a fraud because you're an absolute fraud, like, I'm afraid of being judged because I'm judging everyone. I'm afraid of being cheated on because I'm a cheat. It's like my life is my external life, and my internal thought life is just a reflection of a manifestation of myself. Like, I don't worry so much these days about people talking badly about me. I don't worry so much about my husband cheating on me. I don't worry so much about being judged. I still definitely care a lot about what you guys think about me. And unfortunately, there's still a lot of judgment that goes on in my head. But it's like, you see that? It's like, I don't talk badly about people very much. And like, when I do, I feel really badly and I need to clean it up with the person that I've talked badly about to, not about. I don't go, so, hey, I gossiped about you, like that. I mean, that's not how I'm doing it. But, but it's like, that I come to see through this process that it's like my life is a reflection of myself. And I'm afraid that you're going to find out that I'm a fraud because I'm a fraud when I get here. And I'm a fraud before I've gone through these steps. And I'm some level of a fraud every single day in some way, a heck of a lot less. Actually these days, like, I don't know, I can be pretty weird and pretty okay with my weirdness, and like pretty honest about who I am and what I am. But, it's like, I'm so desperate when I get here for everybody's approval and attention and the right relationship and for my parents to be proud of me and all of this stuff, that it's like, I present this version of myself that I think you're gonna like more than me. I dress the way that I think you want me to dress, and I act the way that I think you want me to act. And, I tell my parents, like, I'm working towards it, and I go back to school to be a CPA, and then I have to tell them I have no desire to be a CPA. Like, I'm an assistant to a crazy Einstein artist, and I love it. But I went back to school to be a CPA. I'm like, don't worry, guys, I'm figuring it out. Like, meanwhile, freeloading off them the whole time. It's like, and then I have to come to them and be like, well, thank you now for spending more money on more school. I passed 2 of the CPA exams, but I don't want to be a CPA. And they're just like they never asked me to be a CPA. That was me deciding that they wanted me to be a CPA, and then trying to be a CPA. That literally, nobody ever suggested that I should be a CPA. But this is how I am, and this is how much I need God, and how much I need a sponsor and all of you to show me how off the beam I am. I have no idea who I am when I get here. And I'm just pretending to be all of these different people in all of these different situations. The big book talks about leading a double life. I wish I only had 2 to get in order when I got here. It was there were 15 different lives that I can't integrate them all. God forbid, somebody from one life sees me with somebody from another life, and it's and of course, I'm all I want is real connection, and I want meaningful relationships. I want meaningful friendships. I want a meaningful romantic relationship. I don't have any of this. I want my parents' love. But what I'm doing is I'm trying to figure out who all of these people want me to be, and then I'm being it. And a lot of times, they seem to accept that person. The problem is that once they accept that person, I know that the person that they're accepting isn't actually me. And so I've placed myself, and this is stuff this is where the fifth, it's this is where writing on its own is great, but I can't get there. I can see how I'm showing up dishonestly sometimes. I can see how, what I get to see in the dishonesty portion of looking at this stuff is oh, I'm being inauthentic. That's about as far as I can get on my own. I need a sponsor to help me to see, do you see that by being inauthentic, you have actually placed yourself in a position where it is impossible for you to have a true, honest relationship with anyone? Because you can't show anyone who you truly, honestly are. So good luck with this life that you're hoping to live. And then it's and I don't have the power to change that. And I'm gonna have to show up honestly, and I'm gonna have to figure out who I am if I want to and share that with somebody, and it's and through doing inventory and sharing it with my sponsor and listening to other women's inventories, it's I start to see more and more how we're not that different, and that's part of why that's part of why I think I can get up here and talk about this stuff is I used to think it was so so terrible and I was the only one, but it's the more and more I sponsor women and talk to my sponsor, it's okay, it's I have these revelations and it's duh, it's I see the same thing happen on the other side of the table, and thank God for this process and the people that have come before us and laid it out so beautifully and the people that are willing to walk us through it, because it's on the front end of inventory, it's no, don't go there. And like I said, it's it's levels. It's when I first get here, it's the stuff that happened in the past that I don't really want to talk about in detail. These days it's stuff the work stuff. That was a lot of my inventory for, years until like God presented me with a job that I can actually be self-supporting last year. But it's like all of this delusion around it of like resentment at society for thinking that I should have to be self-supporting, and and like resentment at my husband for making it seem easy to not work 40 hours a week and support both of us. Like, crazy. Like, I'm resentful at him for easily supporting both of us. Like, and like, I got up at podiums and talked about, like, I was so convinced of this. It's like that, like, I've decided I don't want to work, because like I had convinced myself of that because I was so terrified of it. Like, really, I was just scared to try, and I hadn't worked for so long that like I was absolutely terrified and didn't know how to even apply for jobs when I was like, hi, I went to college and then I didn't do anything for 7 years, but I start to like talk to my current sponsor about it and like write inventory on it, and like it starts to move, and like I start to be able to like see some of like what's going on and just the fear and the delusion that I'm living in, and it's stuff that like I want to be different than it is, that I'm it's like a lot of times it's just stuff that's going on in my head. When Jimmy, when you said like people, what did you say? I had to write it down. Script violators. Like that's a lot of the inventory I write these days. It's like my husband he's here, by the way. I'm not just blindly talking about him, and I think he's pretty cool with everything that I have to say. And he knows this stuff. But he violates my script a lot. He's also like the best husband in the entire world, and I love him more than anything, and he treats me like a queen, and like God has done that because it has not always been that way, but that's another story for another day. But like my script is like, oh, Jack's having a hard day at work, he's gonna come home and like I'm gonna tell him we can do whatever he wants to do this evening. And then like he comes home and he's like in kind of a grouchy mood and had a hard day at work. And I'm like, what do you want to do, honey? And he's just like not really paying attention to me. And he's sitting on the couch on his phone, like playing a game. And I have to leave the room, fly off into resentment. How dare you? Like, I am the world's best wife. And like, I have set all my plans aside for you to help you have a better evening, and you're not even recognizing my greatness. Like there was no, and like then my sponsor's like, so like, what? Like, you weren't at all trying to help him have a better evening. Like, you were just selfishly trying to feel good about yourself. Like, like this is the stuff these days that like inventory looks like. It's not like talking about these like big major events. It's like the stuff, the wildness that goes on in my mind. Like I write inventory about the girl that shows up wearing no clothes at a home group. And it's like, which I was that girl for years in Los Angeles. And it's like we look at like the causes and conditions and what's going on. And it's like, well, I feel threatened. She's younger. I'm like getting into my 30s. Like, I don't dress like that anymore. My husband's there. Like, I'm not that skinny anymore. It's like, so, and my sponsor, okay, so her vanity is interfering with your vanity. That's what's going on here. Yes, that's exactly what is going on here. So I'm just, thank God for this program. Thank God for all of you. Thank God for things like this, people that get together and are enthusiastic about the big book and the 12 steps. And thanks for giving me this time.